Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Soraya.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I have as my guest Sam Shearon, and he is a incredible artist, and we talk a little bit about some of the artwork he's done and for who, but he has also had a lot of weird experiences in his life, and some of them are just downright bizarre. It's a really interesting conversation. I hope you enjoy it. Of course, if you want to help us out, become a patron. It's only $3 a month. I am going to add some other levels in there for some extra stuff. I just got to get some time to do it. We're going to do some cool giveaways, at least for a little bit, to patrons only. We also have merchandise available if you go to wheredidtheroadgo.com. As a matter of fact, you can find everything at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Shows back to the very first show, book reviews, blogs, etc. Also, I am planning on attending Albatwitch Day 2017, and that is October 14th. It is totally free. It's sort of like, the whole city block is part of this this festival, and it's done by the Columbia Creative Factory and Columbia Historic Preservation Society. It is down in Columbia, Pennsylvania. It's southern Pennsylvania. Timothy Renner has a big part in this, and I would love to have some kind of Where Did the Road Go meetup. So if anyone listening to the show can make it out to that, that would be awesome. Hunt us down. We'll be easy to find. Timothy, his band is playing Stone Breath. I think he's doing some kind of presentation. I can't remember off the top of my head. But, it's a very cryptid themed sort of thing. So if you can make it out, it's 11 a.m. to 4 p.m., October 14th in Columbia, Pennsylvania. Just look up Albatwitch Fest, ALBATWITCH. So Alba Twitch or Albat Twitch, however you want to say it. And there you go. And now, without any further ado, here's my conversation with Sam Shearon. And welcome, Sam, to Where Did the Road Go?
Hi, Soraya. Thanks for having me.
Now, you do some amazing artwork. Let's get into your artwork first, just so people can go take a look if they want while we're talking. Where can people find your artwork on the web?
Well, probably the best place to go would be Facebook currently. I have an art page or a like page on Facebook, and in the albums or the photo sort of image sections there, you can see a whole gamut of different artworks that I've done. Generally, I'll create for bands, comic books, all manner of portraits and things like that, and of course, book covers for cryptozoology and the unexplained. But if you go to facebook.com/, and it's Mr. Sam Shearon, and Mr. is spelt M-I-S-T-E-R, and then Sam, and then my last name is S-H-E-A-R-O-N, so Mr. Sam Shearon, and it's the same on Instagram as well. You'll find a whole bunch of visual treats there.
Okay. Now, you've had a bunch of strange experiences in your life.
Yes. Yeah.
What's the earliest thing that you would count as a strange experience?
Oh, goodness me. Well, I was born in England, and I believe it's considered one of the most haunted countries on the planet. Of course, London itself is 2,000 years old, founded by the Romans, Londinium. But I've never actually lived in London myself, though I visited many times. I was actually born in Liverpool, in the northwest, and I spent most of my life growing up there, sort of maybe a couple of hours north on the edge of the Irish Sea, in a little Victorian town. And the beach is maybe 5 minutes from the house. And so the beach isn't a nice beach. When you think of beach, you think, oh, lovely. But no, this is sort of grey sand, black sea, grey sky. Every day is kind of like a Tim Burton movie or something from Game of Thrones. It's pretty grim, but it's a wonderful place full of inspiration to grow up with. All the buildings are old and Victorian. Everything just is steeped in history. So a great place for inspiration, especially for an artist like myself who's interested in the unexplained. But going back, into my childhood, I've had so many occurrences. It's really hard to pinpoint the earliest one. everything from being chased by giant dragonflies. Of course, when you're a kid, everything seems much larger as it is. But I think one of the earliest memories is walking through the local forest when I was a child with a friend of mine, and we heard a buzzing sound. And at first, we thought it was maybe a swarm of bees, so we sort of picked up the pace and tried to go in a different direction. And then we saw a model aeroplane just across the sort of clearing at the forest there. And it was black and yellow, and we thought, oh, that's interesting. We looked down to see whether there was a person there controlling it, remote control, and there was no one around, so we watched this thing. And as it got closer, we realized that the buzzing was indeed this model aeroplane, but it wasn't a model aeroplane. It was a dragonfly, and it was maybe a foot long, maybe a foot wingspan perhaps, a really, really large dragonfly. And then it sort of dove and started coming straight for us. So we just turned tail and ran. And actually, I left my friend behind. I just ran straight past him. And I just kept going. I didn't even, turn around to see if he was there. Needless to say, whatever this thing was, it gave up chase eventually. But that really sort of was one of the first instances that really got me interested in natural history from a more cryptozoological point of view, if you will. Obviously, something that I would learn later as to what that was, but finding out that after living in the Northwest, I would frequent the Liverpool Natural History Museum on Lime Street. And, I'd sit underneath giant dinosaur skeletons and I'd be fascinated by the mammoths and all of these wonderful treasure troves they had there. And I came across a fossilized dragonfly. And so when I got home, I thumbed through all my dinosaur books, and I found, sure enough, there were prehistoric dragonflies really large. Now, everybody I've told this story to has speculated, was this a time slip? Was I looking into the past in some kind of window and this thing had flown through it? Other people have suggested maybe it's just a freak of nature, of a form of gigantism, which happens with every species on the planet. Occasionally you'll just get an incredibly large one-off specimen, one freak. Yeah. Or maybe indeed it was just something completely, new species. We've no idea. But that's the earliest thing.
Did you tell that story on Jim Harold's podcast?
I think I told it on Into the Fray with Shannon LeGros a couple of years back.
Because I think in one of Jim Harold's books, he has a story very similar to that.
Oh, interesting. I'll have to look that up. I'll have to talk to Jim. I love Jim.
I'm trying to remember the details, but I'm pretty sure it was a giant fire or a giant dragonfly that chased someone.
Interesting. Yeah. A friend of mine, Ol Lewis from the Centre for Tea and Zoology in Devon in England, I told it to him, and he actually said that he'd had a similar experience himself, a big green one when he was fishing, when he was younger. And so we sort of swapped details, if you will, and he believes he's seeing the same sort of thing, a really giant dragonfly. So who knows what's going on?
Yeah, it's such a weird thing, because you would think if that existed more empirically, we would have found it by now, especially in the UK.
Oh, yeah.
Which gives it sort of a paranormal sort of thing.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up, because it always, I'll take this with a pinch of salt, and I'm very much on the fence with this, but when people suggest things like Bigfoot living in the UK, I kind of raise an eyebrow and I think, well, the country, it's larger than people think, but it's not very big in terms of being able to sustain a population of unknown hairy hominids. I find it very hard to accept that there would be a group of Bigfoot living in the woods there, although we do have, vast forests out there. Again, it's just not big enough for something like that. And as you say, could it be something more paranormal?
Yeah. I mean, could you have encountered? The thing is, like, it requires some sort of co-creation, where like maybe you encountered some kind of odd energy, and between the two of you, you created a dragonfly out of it.
It's possible. Yeah. I mean, I suppose with pareidolia, when you're looking at something and your brain's trying to make sense of what you're looking at, you'll fill in the gaps and you'll sort of put together what you recognize and what's familiar to you. Perhaps, as you say, an extension of that has actually created this.
Yeah, and it's something that's really hard to prove.
Yes, we ran away. No photographs there.
I wonder what would happen if you had tried to take a photograph of it. Would you just got a blur, you know?
Probably, yeah. Or probably someone would have just said, oh, it's just a regular dragonfly. You can't tell when something's in the sky. Always a problem with UFOs as well, isn't it? Or, Thunderbirds even. How big is it? You can't really tell.
Yeah, yeah.
You always need something in scale in the shot.
And you don't always have it. I mean, when I had my UFO sighting, it dropped down behind a line of trees that I knew were fairly big. So I knew what I was looking at was big, but until it did that, I had no idea if it was fairly close or far away or what.
Oh, wow. Wow. How big was this? What? Do tell me about this. Go on, share your story.
Very, 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 very big. I don't know how to measure the size, but you figure it dropped behind a line of trees that were pretty decent sized older trees, and it probably covered 10 to 20 of them.
Wow. Okay, that's big.
Yeah, it was really big.
Oh,
and I saw it for a few minutes, and I looked at it, and I said, "What am I looking at?"
Yeah.
Tried to come up with explanations, but there's nothing. I mean, that was 2000 that happened, and
fairly recently then. Yeah. Wow.
And so it's not. But the thing is, I thought, could it be a toy? No, it's too big to be a toy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some kind of secret space program, no doubt, or indeed extraterrestrials, perhaps. Who knows?
Well, when I think about it, I come to the conclusion that what I saw was lights. So
okay.
It doesn't necessarily mean there was a craft behind it. It may have looked like that because the lights were staying in spaced out from each other.
Right. Yeah.
But that doesn't mean there was anything actually there.
That same sort of thing happened to me in 2012. So really only 5 years ago or so, in Los Angeles, and we had seen lights, but we were actually stood on the balcony of a friend's house, and we'd gone over to carve pumpkins. It was that time of year, and a couple of us had stepped out to the balcony to have a cigarette and crack open a beer. And one of our friends just sort of shot his arm out and pointed at the sky and said, "What the F is that?" And we looked, and I mean, if you imagine Los Angeles, it's twinkling lights, and you have this orange glow of light pollution coming up. So you'll see dotted about various police helicopters on the horizon. You'll see the airplanes from Los Angeles airport, the LAX airport coming in there. So you're quite familiar with what's in the sky generally on a day-to-day basis. But we all looked up, and above this level, to the stars, we saw a V formation of lights. Now, you could say that it was a giant triangle. You could say it was a sort of chevron-shaped craft of some kind. But as you said right there, we couldn't really determine anything particularly solid. And if you sort of imagine a flock of birds flying in a V formation, all wearing disco suits, that's, they're on the way to some 70s disco, maybe 10 or 20 of these things, but they were shimmering. They weren't flashing, and there was no contrail, there was no noise, and it was really actually quite dim against the stars. And if you looked away and looked back, you'd lose it, and you'd have to sort of find it again. So it was really pretty high up, and considering how high up it was, it must have been enormous. Or, as you said there, if it was a formation of lights, then whatever they were all very, very big. But we actually called the local air base. We actually called one of the local army bases because a friend of mine, he's into all of that kind of thing. And we said, did you have anything on your radar? As they say, did you paint anything on your radar of this? We've just seen this. And this guy, you could tell from the wind, he was stood outside. And he said, "Yeah, man, you're the fifth person who's called us. It's not ours. We don't know what it is." And then click, he just hung up. We tried to chase up the report. There was no record of it. So it was very, very strange indeed.
And it's so hard nowadays to determine what's technology and what's anomalous.
Yeah. I mean, in the age of drones, it's cell phones and, of course, online graphics that people can just create. It's a nightmare today. It really is.
You look at the old accounts. If you have an account of something shooting through the sky and changing direction in 1800, well, that's pretty interesting because we couldn't have done that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But now you got, not only do you have drones, but you also have military technology, and who knows what they have.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. I've been out to Joshua Tree a number of times and sat out in the desert, with friends, sort of laying on the hot rocks from the day and into the night. The rocks are still warm, so it's really nice. And you look across the sky and there's no light pollution. Like I was mentioning earlier from the streetlights in LA, it's totally different in the desert. There's nothing but just stars. And in fact, when the moon rose, it was like a golden disc came up from the horizon. It actually ruined. That was the light pollution. It actually ruined our view for a little while. But the stars are incredible. But as you say, when you're that close to all the army bases around there, I'm sure you're familiar with the convention, the Contact in the Desert.
Yeah.
I went to that one year, and we did a sky watch, and Giorgio Tsoukalos was there, and we all saw these lights sort of zigzagging across the sky. Not even joking. We thought to ourselves on the way there, wouldn't it be lovely if we saw something? Wouldn't it be great? Oh, and we were all excited. And we thought, in all fairness, we had to be sensible and think, well, it's probably, a satellite or military or what have you. And we can only hope and dream. But sure enough, on the first night, we're there. And there's all kinds of things going off in the sky, shooting across, changing direction, as you say, things coming together and then moving off. I mean, it's just another world out there. But as you say, is it military? I mean, out in the desert, who knows? They're always testing things out there.
Yeah. Isn't that somewhat near a military base as well?
I believe so. Yeah, it's not too far at all.
And it's not like the military. I mean, the military has for years used UFO sightings to cover up top secret projects.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. It's sort of gotten out of their hands now, though, hasn't it? It's sort of. It's like the boy who cried wolf.
True. So what other stuff happened to you when you were younger?
Oh, goodness me. Well, God, this is really tricky because I was actually on Micah Hanks's Grelian Report the other day, and I told my ghost story there, so I would be hastened to repeat myself. But I've seen many shadow people, let's say that. I've woken up.
Well, let's talk about shadow people. Have you seen them so you say you woken up, have you seen them in normal waking consciousness or in that in-between state?
Yeah. It's quite strange, actually, because for the longest time, through my teens and early 20s, my parents owned a big stone Victorian building, and it was, over 150 years old. And so we always used to joke that it was haunted anyway. But over time, I would wake up in the middle of the night, and the worst one, really, if I say worse, the most horrible experience was waking up and there was somebody crouched next to my bed, sort of with, if you imagine their arms folded and they're squatting with their arms resting on their knees and their chins resting on their arms. They're just sort of squatting and watching, almost like a chimpanzee would. And it's right next to me, like it's watching me sleep. So, of course, I fling my arm out. It stands up and steps backwards to dodge my arm. And I turn the light on and there's nothing there. So things like that would happen from time to time. And I sort of brushed it off from, just sleep or what have you, until my girlfriend at the time woke me up in the middle of the night, and with the absolute palpable sensation of utter terror and fear. And she's looking at me and she says, "There's someone at the end of your bed." and the way she said it, and I could feel, as I say, I could feel the actual horror coming off her skin. It made me terrified, and I didn't know what she meant. And of course, I had to look, and we said, okay, on the count of three, and we were whispering to each other. And then 1, 2, 3, and we pulled the blanket down and looked, and of course there was nothing there. This happened again, and she actually got up in the middle of the night and said, "I can't stay here," and she left. Much to my disappointment there. But it would happen over and over and over, and then there was a sort of a lull. There was nothing for a while, and then a couple of years went by. And a friend of mine from work had come over for dinner, and me and my a different girlfriend at this stage. I sound terrible, don't I? She was sort of always telling me that she'd seen, what looked like crows or fast-moving cats kind of sweeping across the floor every time she would go into a room, almost as though she'd caught them at something. and they skirted away really quickly, almost like when you lift up an older log and there's a spider, it'll run away.
Right.
She said that she kept seeing these small black, like a crow, like a cat, maybe just shimmer off into the corner, and it was gone. And so I didn't want to scare her, so I didn't really tell her about any shadow people or anything like that. And I sort of said, "Oh, well, don't worry about it. It's an old place. It's nothing." Until my friend came over for dinner, and he went to use the bathroom, and he said, "Where is it?" And I said, "Oh, it's just down the hall to the right," kind of thing. And he came back after a few minutes, white as a sheet. And I said, "Are you okay? Was dinner awful, that bad, And he said, "I thought you were in the kitchen." And I said, No, I'm here. I've been sat here the whole time since you left." And he says, No, you're messing with me. You were just in the kitchen, weren't you? And I said, "No." And he says, "I can't understand it, but I came out of the bathroom and I saw you walk into the kitchen, just the last second of you walk into the kitchen around the corner." So he says, "I went to the kitchen and you weren't there. And of course, there's no back door, there's no other room out there. So whoever went in there was gone." And he just marched very quickly back to the lounge and then asked me, where were you, kind of thing. He thought I was playing a trick on him.
Right.
And I said, "Well, I just don't know. I don't know, And so we started calling these things mimics, because they would tend to indeed very much copy us. Visually, people would see each other down the corridor. It was a very large Victorian house, so you'd catch glimpses of someone, and you'd go to the other room, and they wouldn't be there. This would happen quite a bit. But the worst one, I think, I was at work, and I was working at a design company, and my girlfriend texted me and said, "Where are you?" And this was maybe 4 PM, and I said, "I'm at work. I'm going to be here for a couple of hours. Are you okay? What's going on?" And she said, "Can you come home now?" And I said, "Well, not really. I'm at work. Is everything okay?" And she said, "Please just come home. I'm not actually at home. I'm at the cafe around the corner, but can you please just come and meet me?" So I did. And I went. And what had happened was she had had the day off work, and she was in my little art studio room. And normally what would happen is when I would come home from work, I would sort of knock on the door before I would walk into that room, because sometimes she's on the telephone or what have you. And sure enough, she was on the telephone, and there was a knock on the wooden door. So she thought it was me, and she was talking to her sister, and she said, "Oh, hi, Sam. I'm just talking to my sister. Come on in." And of course I didn't. And then there was another knock, and so she repeated herself. Maybe she thought I hadn't heard her, and of course I didn't enter the room. And so there was a third knock. And she said, "Oh, hang on, I think he's messing around." So she puts the phone on the side there, gets up and goes to the door and opens it. And of course, there's nobody there. She starts looking all over the corridor, all over the house. I'm not in the building. And she just absolutely was terrified, So I met her and she told me that story. So that was that occasion. And then to really put the cherry on the cake, a couple of years had gone by and we'd actually broken up. She had moved away. And I was in the lounge by myself one day, and I was just watching a documentary on television, and I heard her voice call from the kitchen, "Do you want a cup of tea?" and I lowered the volume on the TV, completely silent. And I thought to myself, I must have just been imagining that. And then clear as a bell, without the television on this time, I could hear it quite clearly again. "Sam, do you want a cup of tea?" And I thought, that's it. I'm done. These mimics have got the best of me. I'm out. So I moved.
Huh. That's pretty creepy.
Yeah. It's pretty awful.
Now, did it repeat at all once you moved? Did you ever have that experience again?
I've as I say, I live in Los Angeles now, and the apartment that I'm about to move out of, I've certainly woken up and there's been shadows here, there, and everywhere. And in all honesty, I don't think it's me. I think that they're just there. I think they're everywhere. And I think when you move into any place, it has a kind of a stain or maybe an occupancy of some kind of entity from some other realm, who knows. I just think that it's going on, and I think there's, possibly ways to call them in. There's certainly possibly ways to get rid of them. Certainly, possibly. Do you like that? But
So
yeah,
you don't think it could be coming from you unconsciously?
it may well be. It may well be. How do you prove or disprove that? I really wouldn't know. But my only thing is,
I don't think there is a good way to prove or disprove it.
yeah. I mean, friends and girlfriends seeing it as well. I know it's okay. I'm in the vicinity, but have I brought them into that? Am I projecting it out? Is it because of me? I really don't know. My likening to sort of best way to sort of feel comfortable is to say that they're just there and it isn't me.
Fair enough. When these things happen, did you have anything unusual going on in your life?
That's a good question. I mean, they always say that trauma or tragedy or anything like that, or even moving house will disturb things. As I said before, if you move a plank of wood and a spider will crawl away, moving into a place, all the bugs come out. Maybe it's the same. You move into a new place and different kinds of bugs start to come out and start to check you out and find out who you are. Who are you moving into this place? Maybe it's simple as that.
But there's also a thing about liminality when you're going through a process of change. Like when I saw my UFO, it was at a point where my life was changing massively. But I wasn't moving or anything. It's just that things had changed significantly at that moment. And then I see a UFO,
Yeah. That's very strange. Yeah. Yeah. I've often wondered that, if someone dies in the family, or maybe you have a relationship that breaks up, or you crash your car, or maybe you're really excited about something, or maybe even if you're getting your hair cut, anything that's in some ways severe. I have really long hair, so that would be pretty severe if I cut it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I've seen. Yeah.
What do you? What experiences scared you the most?
Oh gosh, that's a good question. I think anything to do with a haunting is probably been the most frightening for me, because it's so beyond control. I mean, not to say that if I ran into a Bigfoot, it wouldn't be terrifying, but I think anything that's paranormal or beyond our sort of solid understanding of what we can really tangibly touch, I think is absolutely terrifying. I remember many years ago, I think I was in my early 20s, I stayed with a group of friends at a place called Chingle Hall in the UK, and it's near the city of Preston. And this is a building I think it's around 700 years old. And it's a small little cottage in a farmland area. And it had the title of the most haunted house in England for the longest time. And it has, a laundry list of different ghosts that haunt the place: children, nuns, monks, soldiers, centurions, all kinds of different things. And so the people who own it would open it up for guests to come and stay, and you'd pay a certain fee per head, and you could have, I think it was up to 7 people could stay over. And it wasn't a very big building at all. In fact, there were only 2 rooms up the stairs, very, very small cottage. And we stayed one night, and I took a whole range of cameras with me and tripods and things, and of course my friends were just there for the crack of it and the laugh. They were really excited, and I was there to sort of, again, to enjoy it, but I really wanted to see if I could capture something on film. Of course I didn't. I'll say that now before anyone gets too excited. But what did happen, I really wish I'd gotten on camera, because it, to this day, gives me chills thinking about it, was the idea that I would have a camera in each room. I would say to my friends, as a rule, none of us go in that room until a certain time when I tell you I'll set my alarm. And so we know that none of us are messing around, so that none of us are playing any tricks, and that everything is kosher, correct, and recorded, So we all agreed we would all stay together, and we'd spend an hour in each room. So there was, I think, 4 or 5 rooms downstairs, and then the two larger rooms at the top of this cottage. We would spend an hour in each room. Now, we did this throughout the night, and throughout the night we just talked about who knows what. And when you go up the stairs, there's one corridor that leads, as soon as you get to the top of the stairs, there's a doorway to one room, and then there's just simply one corridor, which is a dead end, which is basically the other room. There's no way past it or through it. So I set up the cameras in there, and this room was reportedly one of the most haunted rooms in the whole building. There was many times people had said a man stood behind this armchair. He had apparently been a very horrible character. He's been recognized as someone who had lived there centuries ago, and it was actually an orphanage at one point. And this man was supposedly, not very nice to the children, let's say that. And people have seen this figure everywhere. And the door will rattle if you close it. So the people who owned it said, please leave the door open. People have apparently closed it in the past, and the door has swung open and, nearly thrown them across the room. So we thought, well, these are great stories. Let's just see. So we set the cameras up. I decided to sit in the armchair for a few minutes, and I spoke aloud and I said, okay, then show us what you've got. We're going to leave you to it. And then we left that room and we walked back down this corridor to that first room. And I was the last person out of that room. So my 6 friends went ahead of me into the first room, and I left. I was the last person leaving that room. And we went and sat in the other room. Now, because my friends had already gone in there, I was obviously the last one in. And so I was sat in the doorway. And we were there for maybe an hour, and my alarm went off. I said, I'll go and change the camera and then we can move. When I stepped out and looked back down the corridor, this armchair had moved from the corner of the room without any of us hearing anything. It was now in the doorway facing us down the corridor, almost as though it was a message. It literally, and this was a big wooden old leather armchair. You couldn't have moved that without creaking or banging. One person couldn't lift it, and it had literally moved from the corner of the room into the doorway. And it was the most horrible feeling. One, I was excited because, oh my God, this is real. Something happened. But I had this just unbelievably overwhelming sense of dread. Like it was beyond my control, and it was almost threatening, It was a really horrible feeling because I couldn't do anything about it. And there was a clear sort of example and a message and a sort of a demonstration. Look what I can do. Don't make fun of me kind of thing. Yeah, that was horrible.
But it wasn't on camera.
But sadly, it wasn't on camera. No. And I'm really just kicking myself because of that, And it's ironic as well because every other room, we had the cameras set up here, there, and everywhere. And this was just, it's almost as though it knew,
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's how the phenomena plays games.
Of course, yeah. Every time.
What are you not watching? Well, that's where I'm going to be.
Yeah. It's funny how Bigfoot tend to avoid, 250,000 trail cams. Yeah. I mean, there's 250,000 trail cams are out there, and somehow they avoid them. Yeah.
Have you had any cryptid experiences other than the dragonfly?
Well, I'm a huge fanatic about Sasquatch and Bigfoot. And I've been into the redwoods in Oregon, Washington, Northern California many times over the last 10 years. And I'd go and spend a week or two up there with a friend. And I'll say this straight off the bat, again, not to disappoint anyone, I've never seen one, but I do believe I've heard one. I went up to Ape Canyon one year, and we drove the car up the mountain, and so high up the mountain that it was actually snowing. And we thought, well, let's see how far we can get. And we carried on going. And at one point we stopped to let a truck pass. And I looked out the window to my left, and right next to us was this deer. And I'm talking, its face was 6 inches from the window, and it had these huge black eyes. And I just freaked out. I think I screamed like a girl because I just was not expecting this face with black eyes, just, these glassy doe eyes. And it's just stood there chewing grass, it doesn't seem to care. And And I'm calmly sitting in the car, and I just turn to my left, and oh Jesus, there it is, But that had sort of gotten us a little worried and apprehensive about Sasquatch. It sort of gets you all excited again, that kind of thing. And we drove on a bit further, and then we hiked up a little, and we got to the very top of this mountain range after sort of traveling for a while. And it was windy, it was cold, and so we thought, well, let's have a cigarette and then think about whether we're going to continue or head back, because we've only a few hours of daylight. You have to be really careful where you are in that time. And we heard this wailing sound, and it was like a moan. It was almost like an opera singer, but incredibly bassy and gravelly. And we looked at each other, and we both said, "That's not a bear." And then we were like, "Is it a coyote, maybe?" No, far too bassy. But there was almost a solemn, upset, moaning, just a wailing, just a miserable wail. And it was coming from sort of across the ravine on the wind. And it was so haunting. And we thought, is that Bigfoot? And we were joking to each other, and we were like, is it? And then, of course, you start to get worried. What if it is? What do we do? We don't have any guns on us. We don't even have a flare. We're not exactly prepared for this. So we're kicking ourselves now. But even my mum said, isn't that what you wanted? Why did you run away? But yes, we turned tail. We turned tail and we ran because whatever it was, it just sounded very big.
Joshua Cutchin and I have discussed the idea of a wilderness poltergeist, because so many of these Bigfoot accounts, when you look at them, they behave very much like poltergeists do. And even something like that, I mean, if you were in a house and you heard that, you would think, oh, it's a spirit. Yeah. But if you're in the woods, it makes you think Bigfoot, because, that's just how our brains, put these things together.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I've never even considered that. Wow.
Because, I mean, everything from stones throwing and knocking and all that stuff is poltergeist stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. Now, is it, you mentioned earlier there about trauma and setting things off. They always say that poltergeist activity is connected to sort of teenagers, and particularly girls, and that kind of thing. And I wonder, if you're lost in the woods and you're distraught, do you attract things?
Huh? Or is there just pockets of energy out there?
Yeah, maybe. I like that.
I mean, there's enough weird stuff in the woods, and I think that there's stuff in nature that just, we don't quite have a grasp of. We're so outside of it at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so much going on with the, the missing people in the wilderness with, David Paulides and Steph Young as well, of course. Yep. These incredible authors that both in their own right have done their great research on their own paths, and they've both come up with, pretty much very, very similar sort of mysteries out in the wilderness to exactly what you're saying there. As, what the hell's going on? Is this literally the wilderness untouched that we just yet to understand? I mean, it's just bizarre. The mind boggles.
And there's a reason, I think, that Native Americans and such and ancient cultures would have selected certain areas as sacred. I don't think it was random. I think they were more in touch with things. And of course, it's always and Paulides pointed this out, Andrew Collins pointed this out, and many others have as well, that places that have like devil names and such are usually places with activity. So this is ancient cultures recognizing, hey, there's something going on here, and we're going to warn people with the name.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good tip, isn't it? Don't go there.
It's Devil's Canyon. Oh, that sounds nice. Okay.
Yeah, let's have a picnic there. Yeah.
I mean, if you're looking for something weird, then maybe that's what you should be looking for. But
yeah. I wonder if has anybody written a book entirely just on devil named places? There must be.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Well, I would get writing if I were you. There you go. I'll do the cover.
So how did you get into artwork? Were you always an artist?
Yeah. According to my mom, I've been holding a pencil since I could hold a pencil. I've gone through the whole art school thing, and I did the degree in England, and then I became an art teacher. had exhibitions. They ended up in the national newspapers, and things were just sort of carried on. And then when I was about, I think 24, 25, I was actually working in a pub in England. And in my spare time, I would, with the advent of MySpace, there was a time when you could finally reach out to your favorite bands and contact them directly. And I sort of reached out and said, I'd really like to do artwork for such a band or what have you. And then I was headhunted by a company called Bravado, who they cater for everyone from Motorhead to Madonna. And they do the merchandise designs and, the T-shirt designs and things like that. And they had asked me, would I do some merchandise designs for Iron Maiden? So I said, of course, yeah, I'd love to, And with that, I was already working with a band in Los Angeles. A friend of mine now to this day, Jason Charles Miller, he has an amazing recording studio out in Los Angeles, Central Command Studios. It's a brilliant place. Lots of albums have been recorded there. And he said, if you ever want to come to LA, you've got a place to stay. You can stay at the studio. So I got paid from Iron Maiden, and I contacted Jason. I said, is the office still there? And he says, yeah, come on over. And so since then, for the last decade, I've basically been in Los Angeles creating for my heroes, in a sense, if you want to look at it that way. And it's nothing stranger.
What Iron Maiden stuff did you do?
Well, basically, Iron Maiden have, they have their main artist, Derek Riggs, who does all the Eddie designs and all the old album covers and things. And they had done, it was 2007, I think, or 2006. They had done a world tour somewhere back in time again. And it was kind of like a best of tour. And Bravado contacted me and said, we need extra merchandise. We need to bring in, more for this tour. And, no disrespect to Derek, but he really is only a one-man army. So we need some new designs for you. So basically I designed some of the merchandise for that tour, just a couple of the little elements that went on the shirts and things. But after that, it spiraled out of control. And being out in Los Angeles, it only takes you a week, and you've already opened the door to meeting so many other people in the industry. And I've since gone on to create for people I've only dreamt of, really, and luckily enough to have met and hung out with, and I've got some amazing stories. It's quite a brilliant thing to have found myself in this career path that actually went the way it has. To be able to illustrate for things that I just generally enjoy, it's great. I've created for Clive Barker now. I've illustrated some of the Hellraiser stuff there for him. I've worked for Stan Lee. I've created for Rob Zombie and Ministry, and it just goes on and on, But it's really the people that I enjoy more than anything. It's really nice to be able to sort of put your creative mind together and come up with something that, for me, I'm very nostalgic. And if I buy an LP and the artwork's fantastic, then, I'm going to appreciate the album more. And that's sort of my code of conduct is that when I'm approached by someone, I'm sort of the guy that gets paid to make them look good. So I take it very seriously.
And now you also draw like cryptids and stuff. Is that more for your own thing?
That's definitely the creating for the bands and the comic books and things like that. That's the sort of the day job, if you will. But the passion and the real sort of the drive and the interest is indeed the unexplained and cryptozoology, particularly. And I've done a lot of work for Seth Breedlove and the Small Town Monsters team. And Small Town Monsters, they do these fantastic documentaries, short little films about individual occurrences. They've done the Mothman, the Beast of Whitehall, the Boggy Creek Monster. They just done Invasion on Chestnut Ridge. They're about to do the Flatwoods Monster and Bray Road. They've got this amazing track record now. And I believe Seth won Cryptozoologist of the Year from Lauren Coleman this year.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah, he got his little gold Yeti. But that's definitely something that I love doing. I love illustrating cryptids. I've also done book covers for David Weatherly as well.
Okay, all right.
I did his Woodknocks, Volume 1 and 2. Strange Intruders, his Black Eyed Kids cover, he's remastered and re-released. And so, yeah, working with all of these people and knowing people like yourself and of course, Cam and Kyle from Expanded Perspectives and absolutely Dr. Micah Hanks, indeed. And, it just, the list goes on, these wonderful people that I can now share stories with and listen to all these different podcasts. It's just, it's fuel for the artwork these days. I should really put my own book out, I think.
Yes. Yeah, you should. I mean, you have enough interesting stories. I'm guessing we've only scratched the surface so far.
Yeah. It's crazy.
So what's, you've already shared so many weird ones. What do you consider some of the weirdest things that have happened to you? Like, what are some of the things that you walk away going, I have no idea what that was?
Well, yeah, okay. Well, you might like this one. It was Christmas, maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, perhaps. And we were at my parents' place, and my grandmother was staying over. And it was a really nice sort of atmosphere. The family were around, and we had just redecorated the dining room they have this, big stone Victorian building. And we put new carpet down, we painted the walls. So there was nothing in this room. But obviously we had to have Christmas dinner. So it was a little bleak, but we set up the dining table and chairs in there to have Christmas dinner. And I said, should we put some music on? It might make it a little more comfortable, whatever. So my mum said, yeah, go and put a stereo in there and put that new CD on that you bought for me, which was Meatloaf. It was one of the Bat Out of Hell. I think it was the third one or something. But yeah, so I went into the dining room, and again, there's nothing in there. And I put the stereo on the floor and plugged it in, and I put the CD on the top of the dining room table, and then I went to get placemats and cutlery to sort of set the table. I hadn't started playing the music or anything. It was still sat on the table. And I went back in because my mum said, oh, it's all ready. Let's start bringing things in. I went back in and the CD was gone. And I said, it was still in its case and everything, but I was like, Mum, where's the CD? And she said, what do you mean? And I said, it's in its case. I just put it on the dining table right here in the middle. Have you moved it? And she said, well, no. So I went and asked my stepdad, and he said, no. And I went and asked my grandmother, God bless her, she's sitting watching television, and she hadn't moved, and she said, no. So we were all sort of scratching our heads, and I looked under the table. I pulled all the chairs out in case it had fallen onto a chair, and I had a look there, and this CD had vanished. And I'm just absolutely puzzled by it. And so we looked everywhere. And my mum said, well, maybe you were just thinking about something else and you've taken it somewhere and put it down somewhere else. So I thought, well, yeah, probably that makes sense. That does happen. Mm-hmm. So I went to every room. I looked at every table. I even went to the bathroom and checked on the counter there. And I even looked in the fridge. You hear stories about people putting their car keys in the fridge.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
It does happen. So I looked everywhere and could not find this CD anywhere. So we ended up even looking in the bin, because obviously the Christmas wrapping paper, we sort of just pile that all together and shove it in the bin. So we ended up pulling all the trash out and thinking maybe someone's accidentally thrown it away, and it just wasn't anywhere. So it was gone. And so we gave up. We thought, well, that is a mystery. We don't know. And then I walked back into the dining room, and guess where it was?
In the CD player?
Right. No, right in the middle of the dining room table where I had originally left it. It just reappeared. It was just there. And it was the most mind-boggling thing I've ever experienced in my life. It made no sense.
Huh. That is freaky.
Yeah. Something was playing tricks, I'm sure.
Well, when we look at the missing people in the woods phenomena, though, that is kind of what happens, is that someone will disappear and then they'll be found where it's already been searched.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's very strange.
It's that sort of trickster thing going on.
Same thing. Yeah. I wonder. Maybe someone borrowed it to listen to for a little while.
I
and
had
then they gave it back.
I had a sort of poltergeist thing going on with AC/DC at one point.
Oh,
Where I don't like AC/DC.
no?
Never been a fan of the band. I mean, they're okay. There are certain
Uh-huh.
songs I think are okay, but overall, I'm not a fan. And
Yeah.
it came on the satellite radio, and so I muted it because I went, AC/DC, and I muted it. I walked away, and suddenly I get outside the room, and this big piece of metal, this grinder, just comes flying off the shelf in the room I'm in and slams into the floor, and I'm like,
Wow.
well, that shouldn't have happened. And then suddenly the stereo turns on and cranks all the way up.
Oh, goodness.
And I walk back in the room and I'm like, oh my God, it's so loud I can't even get to it, and I run over and I turn it down and I'm like, no AC/DC. And I walk back out of the room and it turns on again and cranks all the way up.
Oh, wow.
And I come back in and I again go, no AC/DC. And I turn it off and it stayed off. A little while later, I go to do a show and the physical switch on my microphone turned off twice while I was talking.
Wow.
Like just,
Yeah.
boom, I'm talking. Suddenly they're like, are you still there? And I'm like, yeah. How did that, like it's right there. It's not touching anything. I wasn't touching the microphone. There's no reason that should have been able to happen.
Yeah.
And the final thing was I have a CD case I bring with me to my music show. And the next day I picked it up and it was open. And I had no idea it was open. I couldn't have put it down open or things would have fallen out, but it's like someone carefully unzipped it while it was sitting on its side on the floor. So I picked it up and CDs went all over the room.
Oh, my God. Yeah, that does happen.
So you get that trickster element,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It makes you wonder. It really does. It's definitely something going on.
So someone wanted to go listen to Meatloaf.
Yeah, and then they gave it back.
Right.
They didn't
my poltergeist clearly liked AC/DC.
Yeah, yeah. So it'd be funny at the end of this episode if we have AC/DC playing.
What would you say are some of your favorite bands?
Well, I always say that my number one favorite was the band Typo Negative from Brooklyn, New York.
Sure.
I had the pleasure of meeting the now sadly deceased Peter Steele many times. And I've gone on to be good friends with, the rest of the band members and things. I love industrial music. I love classical music. I love anything that's sort of a little bit unusual and alternative. Tool is a great band,
Sure.
9 Inch Nails, Monster Magnet. Those are my kind of things. But you can't beat Black Sabbath. I'll say that.
All right. So what would you say, like, as far as doing artwork, what's your favorite band that you've done artwork for?
Oh goodness, that's a really tricky one to answer.
But I mean, was there someone where like you're like, I just really want to do artwork with this band, and then it happened?
There's been a few. And it's always nice when they approach you as well, and it's sort of your jaw hits the floor and you think, wow, this is, someone's looking down on me to make this happen. This is great. I've always been a fan of White Zombie and Rob Zombie.
Mm-hmm.
And as a teenager, I used to have posters on my wall and stuff. And I've been lucky enough to meet Rob a couple of times, and ended up doing some artwork for him. I think it was back in 2009, maybe. Hellbilly Deluxe 2 has some of my artwork in there. I did a large tour poster for him at one point, very large, and he was definitely sort of a bucket list for me as a creator to sort of work with, because I was such a fan of his music and his own sort of interests and obsession with horror films. For me, it was a sort of no-brainer. I wanted to do something for him. But other bands, again, that I'm really fond of are bands like Ministry. I'm actually working on their new album now, and that's Americant with 3 Ks. Quite dangerous there, but that comes out in the new year. I
thought they were done.
They've been done twice, but the way Al's put it is the last album that they did, from Beer to Eternity, had their guitarist Mikey Scasey on it. Now he's sadly passed away, but that was the last record he played on it. So Al has called that the end of ministry as that chapter. And so he's very cleverly brought it back in a sense that this is now a different ministry. This is a new lineup, different band members. So it's almost like starting again, you know. And I mean, you look at Nine Inch Nails, they did the same thing. You know, they did the Wave Goodbye tour, and he called it a day and disappeared. And then, of course, it's all very tempting, isn't it, to just do one more album?
Yeah. It's musicians and wrestlers. You know, they both retire constantly, and then the next thing you know, they're back.
Yeah.
I think it's a lifestyle that's hard to just walk away from.
I believe so, yeah. You know, you could probably make all the money in the world and you'd still probably want to do it. You know, at the end of the day, it's going to itch you, isn't it? If it's in your blood, then you're a musician, you know.
Yeah.
Why call it something else?
I mean, I'm assuming if you suddenly decided you weren't going to do artwork anymore, it would only be a matter of time before you went, yeah, you know, I had this idea.
Yeah. I mean, my problem is there are just not enough hours in the day. I find myself illustrating one thing, and then my mind will just go off like a multi-tentacled octopus with different ideas at the end of each leg, and this thing's just scurrying away around my mind, and I have so many ideas for so many books, and unfortunately, you know, I'm 40 now, and it's I'm 40 in March, but you know, there really isn't that many years in life. And that sounds very depressing, and I'm still young, but if you look at life in general, if I live to 80, I've only got 2,000 weeks left.
Well, but think about it this way, though. Okay, so you're 40, but only 20 of those years have you really been an adult and productive.
That's true. Yeah. Well, if I keep going like I have for the last 10 years, then I think I'll be okay. But there's just far too many cryptids out there. There's just so many things that I want to illustrate. It would take an age, you know, but I'll do it. I will do it.
So besides the obvious ones like Bigfoot, what would be the cryptid that most interests you?
I find the romantic idea of living dinosaurs really sort of makes my mouth water. The idea that there could be something living in the Congo or deep in the Amazon, you know, those kind of things, even in the outback of Australia. There are so many different stories of giant, what sound like giant reptiles wandering around there. And you have those sort of anecdotal stories of the natives being shown a book of animals, and there's one picture of a dinosaur that they've put in there, but all the rest are known animals. And right. they'll go through and they'll say, did it look like this? And the natives will say no, and they'll all shake their heads, and then they'll turn the page, was it this? And they'll say no, and then it comes to the dinosaur, and they all sort of scream, and they say, that's it, you know, that's Mokele Mbembe, or, you know, that's Amila Natuka, or, you know, that really excites me.
I would have to agree with that. You also got the pterodactyl sightings that pop up once in a while.
Yeah, those really are something that I think is probably more likely. As likely as that is, you know, it's probably more likely than a gigantic family of reptiles to certainly have these flying pterosaurs. These, you know, are they thunderbirds? I don't think they are. I think thunderbirds are simply, and I say simply, but, you know, giant eagles, which we know do exist up to the last ice age. There were absolutely enormous eagles, and I'm sure that the memory of being preyed upon by these things in native culture, particularly Northern American native culture, you know, they do have thunderbirds as a huge part of their catalog of animals that they recognize as being real. Except, you know, we don't have them today on record as a type specimen or anything, yet people see them still. You know, people see these, you know, 30 feet wingspan, small aeroplane-sized eagles flying around. But flying reptiles, pterosaurs, those stories, you know, some are down in Vietnam, some are down in, you know, South America, of course. You'll occasionally get them in Texas, and that does intrigue me. That makes me wonder, you know, could there be a population of small flying reptiles that still flitter about? Yeah, possibly. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're almost out of time. Where now, you said Facebook is the main place that people could check out your artwork?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the art page itself is Mr. Sam Shearon, but feel free to add me on Facebook as well. It's just Sam Shearon if you want to add me as a friend and have a chat. And again, I'm on Instagram and I'm on Twitter. I forget wherever else, but yeah, it's
But
it's all there.
no web page.
Not yet. That's currently under construction and has been for about 10 years.
What what was I just going to ask you? Wow, I just totally blanked. I was saying about your artwork, but do you have a Patreon as well?
I do, but again, as I was saying there are not enough hours in the day, unfortunately. With the amount of work that I have on the table, it's very hard to dedicate enough time to keep that running. So I'll keep pausing that every month as well until I have a sort of a window, and then I'll be like, right, it's Patreon time. So that's actually currently on hold.
Okay.
But I do have a big cartel where you can buy prints of various artwork that I've done in the past. There's even a Bigfoot on there. But that's Mr. Sam Shearon again. So it's MASTER, Sam, SHEARON, .bigcartel.com. And that's linked on Facebook as well. I'm sure you could probably just type my name into Big Cartel. You could find it that way too.
All right. Awesome. Well, thanks for spending some time with us.
Thank you for the invitation, sir. I love the show. I listen as often as I can, and please keep it going. It's a brilliant show.
And now that you've moved into a new apartment, maybe you'll get some new stories as well.
Yeah, I'm going to have to write that book. Yeah, I'll email you.
Yeah, there we go. All right. Thanks, Sam.
Thanks, Soraya.